At 4:47 p.m. local time, a Russian Su-34 fullback lifted off from Saki Air Base in Crimea. For the pilot and his weapons systems officer, this was just another routine strike mission, one they had done dozens of times before. The entire flight would take less than 40 minutes. They expected to be back in time for dinner. But what they didn't know was that they had been tracked from the very moment their wheels left the runway. 18 kilometers inside Ukrainian territory, hidden in a tree line with its radar off, a Ukrainian Patriot battery was waiting for this exact moment. As the Russian crew climbed through 15,000 feet, everything seemed normal. The engines hummed, and the pilot checked his threat warning receiver. Nothing but the usual background noise of search radars sweeping the sky. No locks, no spikes. The electronic warfare suite showed green across the board. At 18,000 feet, the weapons officer started setting up the release parameters for the UMPK-guided bombs. They were just 11 minutes away from dropping their payload on a grid square in central Kherson, a location Russian intelligence had marked as a Ukrainian command node. Whether it was a real military target or just another residential block, the crew would never know. Their job was simply to put the bombs on the coordinates. The pilot leveled off at 24,000 feet and throttled back to save fuel, their airspeed settling at 870 kilometers per hour. They were flying mission silent, no radar, no data link chatter. This was standard procedure for entering Ukrainian airspace. The less you transmit, the harder you are to track? Or so they thought. The Su-34 crew believed they were invisible, but their cold airframe still radiated heat. And Ukrainian passive sensors had been watching that thermal signature since it crossed the coastline. Back on the ground, the Ukrainian Patriot battery commander stared at his display. This was it, 21 minutes of passive tracking. And Su-34 flying a predictable course, completely unaware it was being watched. The geometry was perfect, the timing was perfect. In his 15 years of air defense work, opportunities like this were incredibly rare. But he knew luck could be a double-edged sword. That Su-34 crew wasn't a rookie. The moment his radar went live, they would fight to survive. The battery was perfectly positioned, but the risk was immense. The commander's biggest problem was passive tracking. His sensors could see the bomber's heat signature, but they couldn't pinpoint its exact location. The margin of error was huge at 90 kilometers away. The bomber could be anywhere within a 12-kilometer wide band of sky. Trying to guide a missile into that much uncertainty was nearly impossible. To get a lock, he had to turn on his radar. But a powerful C-band phased array radar is like a lighthouse in the dark. It's impossible to hide, he made the call. First emission. For 3 seconds, the radar lit up. It swept the sky and found the bomber at 88 kilometers, climbing through 18,000 feet. The uncertainty zone instantly shrank from 12 kilometers to less than 2. It was better, but not enough. The system still needed more data to calculate a firing solution. The radar went dark again. They would need a longer burst next time, but those 3 seconds were enough. High above, a Russian Orlan-10 drone, equipped with signals intelligence gear, was circling. It was designed to detect exactly this kind of transmission. The powerful, distinct signature of the phased array radar was unmistakable. The drone operator immediately reported the contact. They didn't have a precise location yet, but they now knew a Patriot battery was active in the area, and the hunt was on. The hunter had just become the hunted. But it narrowed the search area to a few hundred meters, enough for what came next. The first FPV drone signal appeared within a minute, moving toward the tree line at 110 kilometers per hour. FPV kamikaze drones are cheap, disposable, and fly low enough to move through trees. Essentially a flying grenade with a camera attached. A Ukrainian Bukovel AD, electronic warfare truck parked 400 meters east, detected the incoming signal and activated a directional jamming cone, flooding the frequency with noise until the operator's video feed broke into static. His drone crashed into a plowed field. But jamming isn't subtle. A directional jammer is like a spotlight in darkness. It reveals your position. Russian electronic warfare analysts now had a reference point. Something in that tree line was important enough to protect with a dedicated jammer. That conclusion brought more drones. A second FPV drone appeared 40 seconds later, jammed. A third switched to 2.4 GHz instead of the usual 5.8, hopping frequencies and testing the Bukoval's limits. The operator was now rotating between 3 threat directions, and each jam created another detectable signal. The Russians were mapping the defensive area, one lost drone at a time. The Bukoval couldn't handle it alone. A Ukrainian FPV drone team operating from a ruined basement 600 meters behind the battery began targeting the source, using the direction of each jamming signal to estimate operator locations. They found a Russian team behind a concrete wall, goggles on, antennas raised. The Ukrainian drone attacked. That team stopped transmitting, but another replaced it almost immediately. The probes increased. The battery commander checked the passive track. Su-34 at 20,000 feet, 8 minutes from the engagement window. Still no firing solution. He ordered a second radar burst. 4 seconds this time, the return was clear. Bomber at 22,000 feet, range 81 kilometers, closing at 14.5 kilometers per minute. Track quality improved, but the engagement control station still marked it degraded. One more burst would be enough. But the radar had now transmitted twice from the same position. This time, the Orlan detected something new. The pulse repetition interval, the radar's identifying pattern. Every radar has one. The Orlan recognized it immediately, not just a radar, a Patriot. The highest value target Ukraine had. The FPV drone activity increased. 5, 6 drones approaching from different angles on different frequencies. The Bukoval's internal temperature was rising. The system was not built to run at maximum power continuously. The Ukrainian FPV team located a second Russian position 300 meters south, but the attacks continued. Then one drone got through. It passed through a gap the Bukoval operator left while handling another signal. The Ukrainian team saw it on camera, a small dark shape moving through the trees at low height, heading toward the nearest launcher. Their drone intercepted it 80 meters away. Both exploded in the brush, close enough to shake the crew standing near the launcher. Then the ground shook. A BM-21 Grad rocket launcher had fired all 40 rockets. The rockets arced toward the radar emission area, but the short radar bursts had given only a general location, not a precise one. The rockets landed scattered about 1,000 meters north. Close enough to shake vehicles, not close enough to hit them. A Ukrainian counter-battery radar tracked the launch, calculated the origin, and passed coordinates to a Ukrainian M777 howitzer battery. 6 GPS-guided rounds with 2-meter accuracy were fired. The Grad moved, but repositioning would take time. The battery commander checked his display. Bomber at 24,000 feet approaching engagement window. One more emission would give him a firing solution. But this time, the radar couldn't briefly transmit and shut down. The interceptors required continuous radar guidance, like a light guiding something moving at extreme speed while revealing your own position. At 5:19 p.m., the bomber entered the engagement window, deep enough that evasive action would disrupt its attack, 90 seconds from release. At 5:21 p.m., the Patriot radar activated again. This time, it stayed on. The radar acquired the bomber at 73 kilometers and locked on in under 4 seconds. The first PAC-2 missile, weighing 900 kilograms and accelerating to Mach 5, launched. Every Russian sensor in range now had a continuous Patriot signal. Inside the Su-34 cockpit, the radar warning receiver activated immediately. Fire control lock. The pilot didn't need to check the threat library. That unmistakable tone, that piercing sound, meant only one thing. A missile was either in the air or about to be. In a split second, the pilot reacted. He threw the massive bomber into a hard defensive brake, rolling it nearly upside down and pulling into a gut-wrenching descending turn. The force was immense, pushing both crew members deep into their seats under the crushing weight of 6 Gs. This wasn't a drill. This was a fight for survival. As the pilot wrestled with the controls, the Weapons Systems Officer, or WSO, was already a step ahead. His fingers flew across the console, activating the Cabine-U electronic countermeasure pods tucked away on each wingtip. These pods weren't just simple jammers. They were sophisticated digital warriors. The system immediately analyzed the incoming radar signal from the ground, the electronic signature of the enemy Patriot battery. In a flash, it began transmitting a distorted, chaotic return signal. It was a digital ghost creating false range data and phantom targets, all designed to confuse the missile's brain and disrupt its tracking solution. But that was just the first layer of defense. Simultaneously, the UV-26 dispensers spat out clouds of chaff. Thousands upon thousands of tiny metallic strips, each one precisely cut to match the Patriot's radar frequency, exploded into the air. They formed a massive, glittering cloud over 300 meters wide that on the radar screen looked just like another aircraft of perfect decoy. Meanwhile, on the ground, the Patriot battery was in a frantic race against time. The moment their missile had launched, the commander had screamed the order to displace. This is the deadly cat-and-mouse game of modern air defense. You fire, you move. If you stay put, you become a target. Soldiers scrambled, yanking thick cables from the launchers. One empty launcher was quickly hitched to a tow vehicle, ready to be dragged to a new, safer location. Nearby, their own defensive jammer, the Bukovel, switched its tactics. Instead of a focus beam, it went into an omnidirectional mode, creating a wider, but less powerful, blanket of electronic noise to disrupt incoming enemy drones. The heart of the Patriot system, the powerful phased array radar, had to stay active. It was the electronic leash guiding the missile to its target. If it shut down, the multi-million-dollar missile would become just a useless piece of metal flying blind. So, the radar kept transmitting, painting the sky with its energy, all while the crew frantically prepared to pack up and run. The clock was ticking, 30 seconds to impact. The bomber continued its downward spiral, bleeding off altitude and speed. The WSO watched his displays as the Cabini system cycled through its library of jamming frequencies, trying to outsmart the enemy radar. But the Patriot was a formidable opponent. It adapted in real time, changing its own frequencies, its complex algorithms filtering through the electronic noise, trying to find the real target amidst the digital ghosts. 20 seconds. The bomber released another burst of chaff, leaving a trail of sparkling clouds behind it as it twisted through the sky. 15 seconds. The air was thick with tension. Every second felt like an eternity. 10, 5. Then a massive flash. The missile detonated about 60 meters away from the aircraft. Its proximity fuse had done its job, triggering a deadly explosion that sent a wave of tungsten fragments ripping through the air. At that distance, the cloud of shrapnel was spread out, less concentrated. The bomber shuddered violently from the shockwave. A constellation of warning lights lit up across the WSOS panel like a Christmas tree from hell. But the pilot's hands were steady on the yoke. The aircraft was still controllable. They were still flying. They had dropped from 24,000 feet to 21,000 in the maneuver. Their speed had fallen from 870 to 800 kilometers per hour. Critically, the two massive FAB-1500 bombs were still securely attached to the underbelly of the plane. The WSO did a quick systems check. Countermeasures, 32 of their 128 charges already used. They had survived, but they were wounded and their bag of tricks was getting smaller. The pilot had only seconds to make a choice that would determine the fate of his mission and his life. Abort and run for home, or press on and complete the objective. He chose to continue. He pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared in defiance. Back on the ground, the situation was getting even hotter for the Patriot crew. The Bukovel jammer was struggling. The number of FPV drone signals it was detecting had doubled since their radar began its continuous transmission. Russian drone operators were swarming in, homing in on the powerful radar emissions like moths to a flame. But the battery commander couldn't worry about that right now. His eyes were glued to his display, watching the track data of the bomber. It was still flying, still a threat. He made a difficult call. He authorized a second missile launch. His radar had now been active for over 40 seconds, a dangerously long time. He just knew that somewhere on the other side, Russian forces were likely preparing another rocket strike to take out his position. Every missile he launched required more time on the air, more exposure, more risk. But the bomber was still airborne, still carrying its deadly payload. He had to stop it. He fired. The second missile screamed off the launcher, streaking into the sky. It found the bomber at 18,000 feet. The bomber crew had already used up a significant portion of their countermeasures. This time, the Patriot system had an advantage. It had been learning, analyzing the bomber's evasive maneuvers, its jamming frequencies, its reactions to the first missile. It adjusted its own flight path, its own targeting solution. It was an intelligent predator. The WSO threw everything he had left at it. More chaff bloomed in the sky. The pilot yanked the bomber into another high-G turn, the airframe groaning under the strain. But this time, it wasn't enough. The second missile detonated much closer. The concussion was brutal. Tungsten fragments peppered the right side of the fuselage with a sound like a hailstorm on a tin roof. A new warning flashed on the panel: hydraulic failure. The temperature gauge for the right engine began to climb into the red. The aircraft was damaged, bleeding, but incredibly, it was still flying. The Patriot radar had now been transmitting for over a minute. 60 seconds of screaming its location to every enemy sensor in the area. The commander knew that the Russian Grad launcher that had previously fired on them had likely relocated and was probably aimed right at his new position. There would be no warning if the rockets were already on their way. Aboard the bomber, the crew had survived 2 direct intercepts from one of the world's most advanced air defense systems. The pilot, adrenaline surging through his veins, pushed the throttles to the firewall, trying to squeeze every last bit of power from his damaged engines. He had to reach the release point. It was still possible. On the ground, the Patriot commander stared at his display. His mind was racing. 2 interceptors used, 5 remaining in his launchers. The bomber was damaged, yes, but it was still flying, still on a direct course for the city. What should he do? Firing more missiles meant more radar exposure, practically inviting a counterattack that could wipe out his entire battery. If he fired again and failed, he would have wasted even more multi-million-dollar interceptors and given the enemy an even more precise fix on his location, all without stopping the target. But if he did nothing, those 2 1,500-kilogram bombs would reach their destination. It was an impossible choice with thousands of lives hanging in the balance. The fate of the city rested on his next command. The sky over the desert is a vast, empty blue. But on the radar screen, it's a different story. A single, unidentified aircraft is closing fast, its trajectory a straight line aimed at a high-value target. Down below, hidden in the sand and scrub, a Patriot missile battery comes to life. This is a game of cat and mouse played at supersonic speeds where the stakes are incredibly high. The crew in the engagement control station is a well-oiled machine. Eyes are glued to screens, fingers dance across consoles. They've detected the intruder, a large, fast-moving contact. Is it hostile? The IFF, or Identify Friend or Foe system, comes back negative. No friendly transponder signal. The classification comes in, likely a bomber. The order is given. The target is locked. Now, the bomber crew knows they've been painted. Their cockpit lights up with warnings, evasive maneuvers. They bank hard, dropping chaff and flares in a desperate attempt to confuse the incoming threat. But the Patriot missile isn't easily fooled. Its advanced guidance system cuts through the countermeasures, staying locked onto the heat signature and radar echo of the massive aircraft. On the ground, the Patriot launcher canisters tilt skyward. With a deafening roar and a brilliant flash of fire, a missile erupts from its tube, accelerating to over Mach 4 in seconds. It's a silver spear climbing on a pillar of smoke, an intercept course plotted by a computer that has already calculated the bomber's future position. For a few tense seconds, both sides hold their breath. The missile closes the distance in a blur. From the ground, it's just a streak of white against the blue. Then, a silent flash in the distance, followed moments later by a low, rumbling boom that echoes across the desert. On the radar screen, the hostile blip vanishes. Mission complete. The sky is clear once more. This is the unseen, high-tech reality of modern air defense. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.